So thanks, Jessamy, for coming on the show today. You're a sex therapist, a couples therapist, and a sexologist, I think, a sex therapist and an intimacy expert based in Paris. And today we're going to talk about couples and money. So I know a bit about money, but I'm not really an expert on couples.
That's
So
why
the
I'm
first
here.
thing I wanted to ask you about, yeah, exactly. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about was because I find that with a lot of my clients, when they're talking about some of their money problems, particularly in a couple situation, and they're fighting about money, often when you get down to it, they're not really fighting about money as such. They're
Right.
fighting about something that the money represents for them. Is that what you've found with your clients?
Yeah, it's the first question I ask when people bring in that they want to talk about money. I ask, what does money mean to both of you individually? And what were the messages that you got around money as a child? And what are your beliefs around money now? Because it opens up a whole nother kind of conversation.
Yeah, and I find often women and men have different, like money means different things to them. Like I was watching this Ramit Sethi interview where he said for him money meant like growth, and I think for a lot of men it means power and influence, whereas women tend to say security, kind of like a safety net.
Yeah.
So they're already coming at it with really different perspectives.
Yeah, exactly.
And then sometimes I find like if they're fighting about money over like spending of money, for example, the classic example is when a guy comes home and he's just got a new tie. And the wife is like, why did you spend all that money on a new tie? And it's because she's maybe jealous or worried that he's bought that new tie to flirt with someone in the office. So it's not actually about the money spent on the tie. It's about what the tie represents.
Yeah. Yeah. And the idea that how he spends his money somehow reflects his interests that might take him, away from the family or away from her. So the kind of dichotomy between like autonomy versus togetherness, like independence versus togetherness, and what his actions represent for her might be completely different than how he sees it for himself.
Yeah, and I guess that's linked to when we say how money means different things, that if a man is interested in making a lot of money for his own kind of status, that's a him thing, not a couple thing, right?
Right.
So that could lead to, and his spending too, that he might be wanting to spend on things that are going to improve his status or power or whatever, whereas she wants him to spend more money on the family and family holidays and groceries or something.
Yeah, or her, wanting to.
Yeah,
if she's someone
or her. Spoil me.
Or her. If she's someone who receives love through gifts or through like, some sort of like physical concrete objects, like whether it's chocolate or jewelry or just like, groceries are also sometimes considered gifts, how he's choosing to spend his money could also make her feel like she's not being prioritized.
Yeah. And I see a lot of couples where he's spending money on things for him and she gets resentful about that. So she starts spending more things on herself to kind of balance it out. But then neither of them are spending money on their kids, or not so much their kids, but more their future, investing, saving, things that are going to help them in the future. And, I call it revenge spending, because she's not really spending because she needs to. She's spending it because he is, and she feels like she needs to like get that revenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you put the word resentment on it, because I think the kind of calcification of feelings, which we often term resentment, comes from trying to communicate around a topic and not having that communication be successful, in that you're not feeling like you've come to an agreement, not so much a compromise, but like an agreement about two different positions that we can meet somewhere in the middle on and go forward with. If you're not able to find some sort of mutual ground, or feeling like your position on spending is spending or saving is heard, then over time that does create that kind of calcification and hardness around the relationship to money, and then potentially the relationship to the person, which could be called resentment.
That resentment is building up. Yeah. And I guess if couples feel like, because often women would say to me, like, I'm a saver and he's a spender, or the other way around, should I get rid of him because he's not like me? And usually what I say is, well, do you have the same goals? Because even if you're both coming to it from a different approach, if you've got the same kind of life goals, then that's got to make it easier, right?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this earlier in preparation for this talk, about what couples I see, who I've seen in here around money, and several themes when I look at them are around like existential belief systems of I want to live my life fully today, and I want to save a little bit, but really just kind of like be present in the world and enjoy my life, is like one main category of existential relationship to money. And then the other one is money has a meaning that is security, and the meaning that I place on money orients me in my feeling of safety in the world. And so often I've found in the couples that I see, if you've got one in one bucket and the other in the other bucket, it can actually be really complementary, because it pulls the other, it kind of pulls the other towards the other bucket. And so it's kind of balanced in that way.
Yeah. Unless they don't see it that way. Like if it creates tension instead of them learning to have more balance in their approach, I guess. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, and you were saying, because I've always been quite independent, wanting to have my own money and, be independent from my partner. And as a result, I've often been with men who are quite bad at managing their money. But it's like what you said, that they were complementary in some ways, that they, had a different approach, and kind of forced me to, not just focus on the future and to focus more on the everyday, making sure that, I'm living my rich life now, not just someday in the future, which is healthy. But that you mentioned, because what I want to say is that how much money a guy had didn't really matter to me, because I had my own money. But you said you've had clients where that was an issue for them. How much their partner earned created conflicts in their relationship.
Yeah, because
Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. It kind of goes back to this, the concept of resentment, that there's been experience in the past for these women where there has been a disparity in the income, such a disparity in the income, that they have found themselves kind of over functioning in the relationship when it came to money, whether that was by being the kind of the breadwinner, or and have that be not feel good to them, and or that they were the one that was really money conscious and in charge of the budget, and that felt like they were over functioning in that way, that it wasn't balanced for them,
that they had too much responsibility.
And they just didn't enjoy that. And so as they had gone through future relationships, that had been a characteristic that they were looking for in their partner, that dealing with money or handling money or having less of a money disparity was something that they were looking for, because it signaled that they wouldn't have to overfunction in that way, that they could find more of a partner that was balanced for them. So again, going back to resentment, and what we know about relationships is that resentment is relationship poison. And it comes from when one person overfunctions in a significant manner for an extended period of time, whether that be emotionally overfunctioning, financially overfunctioning, caregiving overfunctioning, and the other one can underfunction as part of a system because it's part of how their kind of equation works. So having awareness of money being a factor that they don't want to overfunction in the monetary way.
Yeah, I can see that it's quite similar, I guess, in the way that a lot of women feel that they took on too much responsibility with taking care of children, for example. And so they feel resentment because they're taking on too much of that role and it's not balanced, in the same way that, you know, higher earning women might feel resentment if they feel like they've got too much financial responsibility. It's about having, you know, where is the responsibility and how much have you got it, like you were saying. Yeah. But I think that's a subject that really terrifies a lot of men because especially in the manosphere, you see so much talk about, you know, as a man, you have to be wealthy. The only way you're going to be attractive is if you're really rich. And so they feel like that they have to be wealthy in order to get love. And they don't maybe understand the subtlety or the complexity of the subject, which is not necessarily about the amount of money. It's more about, like you were saying, that balance, right?
Yeah. And the necessity of self-awareness in all of this. Like, I think in the manosphere, one of the things that I really have a problem with is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, being able to name the deeper feelings behind what's motivating that statement. So I'm afraid that I'm not going to be attractive if I don't have money. I feel shameful that I don't make more money and that, you know, I'm not more successful in my life. And that's all stuff that's great to work through in therapy, to kind of unpack and unfold. And I don't see a lot of that happening in the manosphere. So in that sense, I think men are really in that world. It's kind of an easy out to say, well, if I make money, then I will be attractive. This is a relatively simple game plan that if I follow it, I will have happiness, you know, versus let me do some inner work that is not straightforward, that will be painful and is work, you know, a lot of work, but very rewarding, but not linear and not set out for you. So
not a simple answer. Yeah.
No. But I was going to go back around to one of the things that you said earlier, which was that you were independent, and you liked feeling independence, and that's why you were had found yourself in a relationships where you had kind of been able to keep that independence, and maybe found yourself with people who weren't quite as, let's say, savvy with money. Going back to emotional intelligence, like you know why you like to be monetarily independent and to be savvy with your money. You've done the work to understand.
Now I do.
Now you do. Yeah. But you've done the work to understand and that it's not something that you resent your partners, or now I don't think you resent, you know, your partner for having, for not being good at, because it's something that you actually enjoy. The women who are asking for men to be more, to be more monetarily successful, or to be more monetarily stable, let's say, I think are women who have identified that this is something that they don't want to have to carry on their own, and that they feel the imbalance in a way that is not enjoyable, which, you know, in your case hasn't been that same.
And do you think that's maybe also because we're sometimes attracted to people who are like our father or our parents, like our upbringing? And so if your father was the main breadwinner, even though you want to get a good job and earn good money, you still feel like innately it should be the guy making more money.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things there. One is there's an imprint that you have, like the blueprint that you have as a child growing up. The model that you see is often the model that you go towards as an adult because that's what you've known, and we go towards what we know, not what feels unfamiliar. And also, you've come out of childhood with a set of skills that work quite well around a certain kind of household. And so those skill sets are going to be, you're going to feel good using those skills that you've honed as a child. And so we'll be attracted towards people where that skill set can be used.
Yeah, it's like we're attracted to what's familiar as well. Yeah. And what about, because we both live in France, and I would say culturally, things are a bit different. People don't seem to talk about money very much here compared to, in other countries. Do you find any difference with your clients in terms of, what their background is and how they
great
deal
question.
with this stuff?
Good question. Yes. Yes, in that the Americans, or let's say North Americans, are much more open with speaking not just about money, but about what they have and what they want to have. Like, I think it's much more culturally acceptable to strive and to like reach for another kind of not just monetary, but financial success, where that's not what the French, that's not how they value success. How they value success is stable within the system, protected by the system, not as independent thinking. There's this kind of appreciation of staying in the lines, and to stay in the lines, you kind of have to keep your head down.
And keeping things calm in society. I think part of it is you don't rock the boat because we don't want to have another war. We've had too many already, so just be nice and don't rock the boat.
Right. Don't rock the boat. And I mean, this idea of like, say nothing, don't say anything that could create discomfort, and not so much we can debate, but money is not a part of that debate. Like finances and what you have is not what is, it's really culturally, it's really not supposed to make you valuable. What's supposed to make you valuable is your thoughts and your beliefs and your ability to back them up and your ability to hold true to them. It's not the kind of financial or monetary, success, and ostentatiousness is really not valued here.
No.
No.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, but I think even couples from the same culture and the same country still can have conflict over money just because they're coming from different families who maybe looked at things in a different way. Yeah. So it's very common. But
but I do.
Have you got any tips or anything for people who are maybe struggling?
Who are struggling with what?
In their, like, if they find that they're just constantly talking about money, are there any sort of like takeaways or things that they should think about, or tips or anything?
Yeah. So the first thing with money and the kind of constant battle with money is that it's kind of like eating. It's an everyday occurrence. It's something that you are in relationship to on a daily basis. So the exposure to the potential, conflict, internal or partnered conflict around money is something that the exposure is quite high. And so being able to monitor on a daily basis how you handle keeping versus spending your money. If you can track days where you can like regulate when your anxiety, let's say around money, is more regulated, what has happened during that day, emotionally, professionally, personally, kind of what has happened during that day. And if you can start to notice patterns that you spend on days where you're feeling better or worse, because as you know, people spend if they're feeling good versus if they're feeling bad. So that's one thing, is to start, if money really is a topic that couples come in with and say, we really fight out this all the time, one of the things I tell them to do is to individually track that exposure on a daily basis to how they spend money.
So you can see the patterns and you can see why they're having the same fight, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you track when the fight happens. So you track, let's say they have a kind of a big blow up about it, or they notice that they really avoid having that conversation. You see how often that happens. And if there's periods when that conflict happens, that has to come up right before vacation or right after vacation, and get them to be more aware of what the dance of that tension looks like. So when they are in it, they can stop it, or they can pause it and say, what's happening here? Like, we know that this is the cycle. Let's look at it differently.
Yeah, I've noticed that with my husband, actually, that when he feels worried about money, like that he hasn't got enough of it, he starts getting much more stressed and angry. He's quicker to anger than he normally would be. And he's just like a different person. So I have to kind of pause and go, okay, there's something, we're not fighting about this. There's something else going on.
Yeah.
It's that time of the month.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
there's
even
too much month left at the end of his money.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think also with money that for couples, when they come in here, it's often really helpful to have that conversation of what are we actually fighting about? Because money it's really not about the money. It's about the fact that you didn't consider me before you made that decision, or because you are spending because you're stressed, and that's not, I don't deem that to be a healthy coping mechanism. And so I'm judging you. And then now you feel judged and you're getting defensive. There are so many different layers, that if you can, but again, going back to the emotional awareness, like if you can get to the multiple levels underneath the arguments, you have so much more language to communicate around what's happening, so that when you are working through that conflict, you can say, that triggers me because of this. I know myself in this way, and then this is what happens when you do that. And so the other person has an ability to have empathy and to see the what and the why of how you're behaving during that conflict. But it starts with that initial.
Yeah, I think knowing yourself. And a common example I see is women who they get really stressed about money because they feel out of control, that they don't know where their money's going. They're not on top of their budget or their savings or whatever. They're maybe not even on top of how much is coming in. But they feel out of control, and when they feel out of control, they get stressed, and so they start acting more controlling over every little thing, and so then he feels controlled and he's not happy about it.
Totally.
And it just kind of builds up from there. So it can start with like you as a woman saying, okay, I'm getting stressed because of this, how can I fix this, rather than saying, well, you're here, it must be your fault. And maybe blaming your partner for a situation that actually you could fix.
Yeah. No, control is it's a very existential theme, right? Like I want to feel like I have control over my life, and there are only so many ways that I can have that semblance of control. One of them is money. The other one is food. We see this a lot with the eating disorders. The other is, the profession that I do, how I'm seen in my profession, like with the things I do in my job. So it's a big theme. And I think with spending, or with money in general, but spending, one of the things that I see is that when the inside isn't good, like when that we say in French, like the être isn't good, people go to the avoir, to the have, and so it's a way of controlling emotions as well. So like I'll find myself online shopping, and I know now that I'm like, oh no, that means something's inside is wrong, because I'm
what am I doing?
it's like, yeah, exactly. So I totally agree with you that there's this semblance of being out of control, especially when you're not necessarily making a lot of money, or when you're not the one that kind of has the money, the hands on the money, and so you grasp at control where you can, and one of the ways of doing that is controlling the person.
Yeah. I call that money hungry. It's a bit like when you go to grocery shopping and you're hungry, you haven't eaten, and so you eat all the rubbish, or you buy all the chocolate and crisps and all the things you shouldn't buy because you're feeling so hungry. Whereas if you went into that shop feeling, after just you've had lunch and you're feeling satisfied, you're going to be much more rational. And it's the same with money. People get sucked into get rich quick schemes and bad purchases that they regret because they're feeling like they haven't got enough, and so conversely they end up spending more, which actually makes it even worse. Totally. But it's really interesting. I think like you were saying, the self-awareness thing is probably the first step, and it's hard work, and a lot of these people are doing things subconsciously and then maybe don't recognize that they're doing it. And sometimes it's when your partner says things like my partner would say to me, "Why are you shouting?" And I'm like, "I'm not shouting." Am I shouting? And I realize I am, speaking louder. Maybe not shouting in my family, but like,
right.
But you don't realize you've gotten emotional, whereas other people can see it. Yeah,
and it makes me think also of people who are. Sorry, you can't. Yeah, can you hear me? Maybe a little bit. It makes me think about the people who are entrepreneurs, or who work for themselves, and who kind of go into like workaholic mode, because they can see the benefits, or they can reap the successful monetary rewards of throwing themselves into work, and that can kind of fuel that feeling of control and meaning and success, because money is a reward for the time that they've spent in the workplace, or in their job. And so it's kind of a slippery slope, because it makes them feel good on the one hand because they're seeing their bank account go up, but on the other hand they're neglecting their home life, or their partner, or just their personal lives, because they feel so much better in their work life. And so money can also kind of come into play in that way,
and their health.
Yeah, and their health, sure. Where let's say the man, but it can also be the woman, really starts to measure success in money, in monetary terms, and so they go towards that because it makes them feel better, but it ends up with a real imbalance in their life.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, it was really lovely speaking to you, and I'll put in the description of the video, I'll put a link. Cool.